Well, next week, the Supreme Court will consider two key vaccine rules brought on by the Biden administration. And the first requires employees of businesses with 100 or more workers to get vaccinated or do weekly testing. The Biden administration said the rule could save hundreds of thousands of lives. The other rule calls for vaccinations for healthcare workers at government-funded facilities. Now, the Supreme Court has upheld vaccine requirements challenged in states across the country. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said, quote, "We are confident in the legal authority of both policies." So let's break this down. For more, I want to bring in Jessica Levinson. She is a CBS News legal contributor and a professor at Loyola's Law School. Easy for me to say. Jessica, thank you so much for being here. Make us smart. The Supreme Court has upheld previous vaccine mandates. So what was their reasoning?
I think actually what you said in the introduction was so key, and it already started to make people smart, which is they've upheld vaccine mandates by states. So this is something a bit different. It's whether or not the executive, whether or not the federal government, in this case, executive agencies, has the power to impose these mandates or testing requirements in the cases of employees. And so that's just a different bucket. I think what we're used to seeing is California imposes a vaccine mandate in these situations, or the city of Los Angeles imposes a vaccine mandate in these situations. But this is different, and there's different legal authority. And I think that's part of the reason why the court had to get these cases off of the emergency docket and into its regular calendar where they'll hear oral arguments,
So let's break this down a little bit. What's different exactly about the Biden administration's vaccine rules, and how could that affect the court's decision?
Yeah, it's a great question. So basically, we're used to in this country, there's more than a century of authority that indicates that states and local governments, under something called their police powers, really do have broad authority to implement vaccine mandates. Under the police powers, it's not actually what it sounds like. It's not just empowering police officers to do something. It's saying to state and local governments, you have power over the health, safety, and welfare of your residents. It's pretty clear that vaccine mandates falls within that bucket. The one thing that you have to be careful of, and we've heard the court kind of meditate on this recently, is whether or not there are enough exemptions for religious activities, or whether or not these mandates infringe on religious activities. And then separate from that, when we're looking at what the Biden administration is doing, we're really looking at two different statutes here. One is OSHA, where you can allow the federal government to protect workers. And the other is the Department of Health and Human Services, and that's the mandate that deals with the healthcare workers. And so the court's going to be looking to completely different sources of law here. They're going to be looking to federal statutes to determine if executive agencies basically stepped out of the power that Congress gave them.
So you talked about religious exemptions. What arguments against the rules, other than that, could we maybe expect to hear next week? Do you know?
Yeah, basically, I think it's going to come down to what we just were talking about, which is, did these executive agencies go out of their lane? Did they just go too far in saying, okay, now vaccine mandate? And we've seen that argument in the lower courts, where some of the lower courts who have reviewed these two vaccine mandates, again, while they're obviously different, while they come from different sources of law, the overarching argument is very similar, which is, okay, Department of Health and Human Services, or okay, OSHA, you can do these things, but you can't do this. You went too far. Congress did not give you authority when you decided to implement a vaccine mandate and or implement a vaccine mandate in this way. So it's really just an argument about executive authority and whether or not these agencies stepped out of bounds.
We are right now dealing with this Omicron variant. And how do you think, Jessica, this spread of it in particular might influence the Supreme Court?
So, I mean, in a way, you can say not at all, because this is just about statutory interpretation. It's just about the Supreme Court doing what it always does, which is looking at a congressional statute and saying, what do the words allow an executive agency to do in this case? On the other hand, you can say a whole lot, right? So one of the questions in the vaccine mandate for the workers is whether or not there's a grave danger that is posed to these workers if there is no vaccine mandate. the Omicron variant obviously just heightens the need for more people to get vaccinated. It heightens the danger that so many employees face. And the same goes for healthcare workers. Just in your last interview, you were providing so much good information about the variant and what could happen as a result. Obviously, so important for us to keep healthcare workers on the job and saving our lives. And so that reality doesn't end at the courthouse doors. The judges are aware of that.
And the last question for you, just a little bit of inside baseball here. The court is returning early from break for this special hearing. So what does that tell you about how much weight that the justices are putting on this decision?
So this is very unusual. The court typically does not take something off of that emergency docket, sometimes called the shadow docket, and then put it into its regular calendar so quickly. So what does it tell us? It tells us that the court understands, one, we're talking about a changing situation where time is of the essence. And two, in some of these situations, the vaccine mandates are about to kick in, and there's different laws that are being upheld in different parts of the country. The Supreme Court has to tell us what's the law, are these vaccine mandates permissible? And they need to do that quickly, in part because of the timeline of when the executive agencies acted, and in part because we're obviously in the middle of a surge.
Absolutely. That is a lot of good information. I feel a lot smarter now, and I'm sure people watching do too. Jessica Levinson, thank you so much.
Thank you.